So let's get back to Darwin and talk about how evolution actually works. So if you remember, Darwin had this idea that species are all related to each other and that they can change over time.
Tanda pelgyur gi drodan di ani Charles Darwin gi sheshagyo di shigi yisma andi tanda ngazo khari shigor lana dina nyirik denzo penzu dewa chayo che nkuran zo changma chigni chungyo dinde ji shigi res.
The type of evolution Darwin was talking about happens through natural selection, and there are 4 postulates that need to be true for natural selection to happen.
Tanda pelgyur chungyo la dugal thangbo chigni ani gyo doni ani nyirik loga chagyo lan she ras andi tanda rangjung demtu da dewa chagyo res ra rangjung demtu la dilani di rangjung demtu gi chagi shi changgo res chungwala.
So first, you have to have a variation in your population. You can't all be exactly the same. There needs to be slight differences between the organisms.
Dila duda nyirik chikpa la chogdu la gora dinde chogdu nang la changma mindo gu res changma chikpa ina di yungu mares di nanglo la tis kheba de mindo gu res.
So here we have some yellow bacteria, some black bacteria within us. Some of us are taller or shorter, stronger, weaker.
Tanda di pesun di khari tun shar na thasin bacteria ga tun shar res ra thasin bacteria do cha shar na khashi khari la na khado seo khashi na guten doas thana shi ngara zu nyiri chik nal khashi subu ringa da khashi chunga yo roas.
For natural selection to happen, that variation has to be inherited. It has to happen through the DNA.
Dila du tanda nyiri tanda rangjo demru chue di DNA gyuni chungwe res DNA di khari la na rigje di chigni mat gyudong che jora di res di gyucha di chadu res.
If I spend my life lifting weights and getting very strong, that won't make all of my daughters and sons stronger.
Dila du khashi jize chimbu kyangye gi tanda luji singye ri do dinde imbaina ngara dinde imbaina ani nge gi phomo da pugu denzo dinde rang chagwe di khapyu mares.
But I will pass on my DNA to my daughters and sons.
Nge DNA di pudam phomula ma gyudong chi yo res.
The third postulate is that not all the organisms in the population can survive. Only some survive to the next generation.
Tanda shesu di shi do chagin di marse ani chik di khari shi du se na sumba dila ta chogdu nanglo la khazu yo da chongme jura di khazu yo di chogdu nanglo la quran zo ani mangyung jura da chone che di changma chikba yung mares khashi chi du res khashi lagi res chone chi dang res changma chone chi du mar lan lagi res.
And more so than survival, it's about successfully having offspring.
Dila du chone che tu aina ani digi ani susugi tanda ma gyuzar la tanda kebel chi tu jura di yungu res.
And this is generally true in nature, where not everyone will survive and produce many offspring.
Dila du chidang gi ngara zu thong de ji cha de res changma khuri na ta na changma chone chi tu yo mara kinde khazu yo di king khazu digi nanglo ni ani tanda chone chi tu aina lamong gyu aina ani ma gyuzar pe tu de yungu res.
So in nature, you might have cheetahs. They can't all survive because there's not enough food for all of them to go around. There's only so many deer to eat.
Dila do da tanda sig de ro cha shai nasra signal gyo athej do chita le didi resra ani quran do cha sha na ani chida tinte thandi changma chune chidu re la na chidu yo mares kaisna se dangi ju yo mares.
And the prey that it's eating here, not all of them will survive. Some of them will be eaten. So not all of the offspring, not all of these guys in the population will survive long enough to have babies.
Thana shi quran gi sasa di khar cha de la na shawa di ras an shawa na cha shawa ne phajo di sagu re dila du wala shawa khazo yo di chajang chune chidu yo mares an chune chima tu ena ani digi thanda gyuzar pe tu yo mares tin juri di.
In nature, there's a finite amount of resources, and those resources can only support so many people or organisms in a population.
Dila du ta chune chidu e jungu ro mangbu ju ras dila du wala dinde dangi ju yo mares zo do e di mangbu ji cha de res cheza ani ngara zo thanda chogdu na la mindo chai di chawi res kenchi.
So just like if you're trying to get into a car, only so many people can fit in this car. Maybe 10 if you squish a lot.
Thana sta di mora di auto ro dina cha sha na rickshaw dina dina la ni quran zo kagas di nang lo kagas shong tu di cham mashi shong tu maras ta peshana mangshu sa gani sha ni ge michul hasta shong tu maras dina.
So in nature, there's only so much grass for the cows to eat There are only so many deer for the cheetah to eat.
Yana shi ani rangjung khamna la sa khagas yuwa jura dil pabe ani shawa yungres ani shawa Quran zul pabe ani thanda sigdin zu yungres todan din dojres.
So Darwin's fourth postulate is that the survival and the having of offspring depends on who is the most fit to survive in their environment.
Dila duta Darwin ki dusu shiwa dirda dinala ni Quran ki kharish lawena ta thanda chogdu nanglo la charaba mangbu jura ki Quran zu nanglo ni khagas ki ta thangayo na digas ki ani chune chitu yuwa jura khori Quran di nanglo la di shi res khori dinala khagas ki tentuye jura di yuhendi ani chune chitu yuwa di shi res.
So it is not random who survives to live and have babies.
Tawndi thanda sul hagre ani ma guzar tong thu rekebel chitu la jura di ngeje mai badinde mares khori la ne thungi dil hagyur lan sherwa ti.
So the fastest cheetah might be the one to catch the deer and have enough food to eat and survive a cold winter. For the car, perhaps a smaller monk would be able to squish in where others might not be able to. So perhaps smaller monks would be more likely to survive.
Dila dugalta chida Quran nangta oinge ta rida gyatme khagas yo en digas dida shawa disatun Quran lagi ras namshi thumo ko sugungala dina she ani thanda order rodi cha shawinas motor chunji dinanglas ani kusho chungaina ani dinal shoyegi that kalore rewata khogab ya res Quran.
So when these four conditions are met, we will see possibly evolution and maybe changes over time.
Dila du di nedang shi she so di shi di changyu yo inas ani tuju dugu ani pelgyu di chungu yo res.
So if there are cheetah where some are faster and some are slower, and that is passed on through their DNA.
Dila duta cheetah ro sik den cha shaw inas sik cheetah ro cha shaw inas Quran juna lokta khashi gyo er khashi te res ani sune chitunge digi am Quran su irigze di ma guzar la tong yo res.
They won't all survive. Only the fastest will go on to survive and have babies.
Dilo di changma sune chida khazu yo di changma sune chidu rela na sik changma sune chidu yo mares di na gyoksho rigjora dindri rigdeni sune chidu yo di shi res.
Those babies that make the next generation will all get the faster genes. So on a whole, they will be just a little bit faster than the population before them.
Dilo duita ngungi ta jelapu haril hadirla na chida di user harir lawaina yoga yo dinsul hagi res lara dindi gi juzar ma tongra dinzo juzar hangma di jela sogduji chagres ngola sogduji yora dingi durdugala rigze yoga yo ngi rigze di khawala manga tongur lawana niba jora juzar dindina thoya res.
So over many generations you can see cheetah become very fast.
Dila duta rigyu mangbush dura di drosa jel tuzu ringbush drosa jela ani chidal hangma dinzo khari yor lawana gyobush yu yoge dindil hadi res.
And as long as speed is an important factor for who can catch enough food to survive, they will keep getting faster and faster.
Dila du tanda chita ro sig ro cha sha na gyolo di khechung chagi res gyose di chesa ani gyose ya ga yong gyose khagas gyoga gyog thing dinzo rig de ani tijo ma do dinzo gyosho rig dinzo ha di res.
And it's all about the DNA being passed on to the next generation. Which traits are passed on to that next generation, you'll slowly see changes over time.
Dila duta DNA khandi ma tang gugu me jura kheda la ra li res ta thanda ro no gyose di ruda khagas gyogu me di ani ma ta di ani dila ra li res ke ko dila.
So let's do a quick exercise to see with our own eyes how better survival and better producing offspring can result in a change in our population.
Dila du sogdu nangla yuwa jodan jura thanda di sone chitunge da kebel ya chitunge jura dindigi kengi ni sogdu la yuwa hande duwe me ding aran so taji ji chibos.
Okay, can I get you four monks to stand up?
Tranzu shigu ji duna chik ya shandas.
And can two of them have their shawls on and two have shawls off?
Ni se indis kangla sharu chidas ni se piro chidas ra. Ni indis tumshana. You want them to cover?
Two covered and two not covered.
Saying indi ni tum sharu chida ni ani se sharu chidas.
Okay, let's say this is our starting population.
Ta thanda peso indas ra. Thangbo chogdu go chogdu dire das thangbo.
We have variation in our shawl trait. About half of our population has shawls on, half do not.
The same gajita oina, di chogdu chai roas, chogdu nanglola, gaja chega di karicharlana, same tum shagyo chega, same meo di roas.
Let's say that this gets passed on to the next generation so that when you have a child, if you have a shawl, your child will also have a shawl.
Dila duta user lama toya jura, kisi pamagi kare tanda di same tum shagyo ina, di keda di ma user la do your rest.
Now let's say it's a very cold winter, so the monks with shawls do better and they can have more children.
Dila duta namshi thamu shu yo ina, ani same tum shagyo di zo troy rest, di ani Quran so ani chune chetu ani Quran so kebel chetu rest user ma le tu rest.
So I'm going to ask our monks to have children. If you have a shawl, you can pick 2 children to come up with you. If you don't have a shawl, you can pick 1 child to come up with you.
Chesanta same tum ni di chune ya erlara. Ani puni dams kira, ani same get the puni dams.
So
damlo ches same tum get ni same get the chick. Puni dam gora, niba dambo ko jeni, niba de puni le chick kiram kilogram pedas. Same tum ni pedagal dina. Ale kumare sentum gorgela sentum ni kroingra samo keranchi la kela ro pogu dire sei de Ni gor kiranda gelala chik ni damda susani ni.
And the ones with shawls get 2 children.
Yeah. Ta krani ra ni gelala chik gor ya ni gor chik po chik dam gor rani dam gor krani di kodogani mdo sentum ne gel. So yeah, we're done.
Okay. Now let's do another generation. Each monk up here gets to choose their children. Again, if you have no shawl, it's a tough winter, you have only 1 baby. If you have a shawl, pick 2 monks to come up as your children.
Ta yangyojik dwe inda sama. Yang Quran so niya tanda sen tumgyo den zo puni ranja dame res. Se megyo den chik chik dame res. Tianzu tengmani ni dam chaimbe sen yu ni dam chaimba tengmani damimba tengmani dam chaimbe tengmani dam na shigora shiminda ni mashminda kyanyam sen tumye engyo kyondamga gora sen tumye na dijode engyo ni dam gor kunso marma kyans takar tengmani la chik chik damra sen kyöne man sen tungul sen yunge de sen tumdara
Did everybody get their children?
yes
Can you start to see a change in our population? We started with an equal number of monks with shawls and monks without shawls.
ta thangbo gochudu gala ngzu choktu juyas dinal gyasa ta ona chikbu chikya ras sen tumjo da matumjo gyajang ngapchu imbas ta gyo dosh thung does tanda chokdu na gyo do does yes
So in just 2 generations, we start to see a big change in our population. What do you think would happen in 20 or 200 generations? Would we still have monks without shawls and with shawls? What would it look like?
ta ta gyudong chini thengmani droradi generation ni draw res dinang la gyo dinde draw ras ta tanda dinde gya ni just draw na ni gyo khapas ture samgu dos la it will change in multiples so
Okay, well, thank you, monks, for your help. So this is a graph of what our exercise might look like. Along the bottom, we see our starting population of monks equal with no shawls as with shawls.
tanda nganzu takji chegoji cheroas tanda thoyandi thiri ro syo ina dinri roji chagyo res thangbo gojugdu gala phagi res lego tamdira dine ni thangbo chodi dilta ina gyajangapchu sentumgyo gyajangapchu sentumyo mares diphad chagyo res gojugsade.
So we see in blue, generation after generation, the number of monks with no shawls, and you can see it stays pretty low throughout.
Di jalda digyu ma duruas di trudugala an the sentumgyo rigdi sogdinal mangro duruas.
But as we do more generations, you see we get more monks with shawls at each generation, and it grows very quickly.
Dila do ani jala ma phala ipu tang inde sin user ma tongdugala ani sogdu di nanglola ani mangro dugu res.
And this is how evolution happens with this change in time.
Dila do tujunal juwash dugu dos dinde trozan tanda phelgyu di chungu res.
Let's do another example, but this time where you don't change the number of babies you have, we're going to change how many people survive.
Ta tanda tachi niwa juyes chego di nanglola ta pu mangyung khaga sume di tang ma resra chodunang tanda di kharch chirlana su sune chitu yeme jora di ta res.
Instead of monks though, we're going to have airplanes.
Tangaji di chego nal khari gugur lawa na namru shobu namru du gugur res.
For your airplane to survive the winter, you have to be able to stand behind this line, throw it, and it has to go straight and far such that it passes this line here.
Ta di chone chur lana khande jil chir lawa na di thik dine ya shang and dine ne namru tang gugur res di tang ne di thik di ya ke ge gugur res namru di.
Let's see if my airplane survives. No good.
Ta nge namru dine tharmasuns.
Let's see if you all are better than me. So we'll give each of you a piece of paper, make different airplanes. We want a lot of variety in our population, and then we'll test them to see who survives.
Dila do ta namru sobda sura kiran zo khari suna di re lasra namru di suni ni tanda taje thara chego thara tang chegu res sune chitu me tanda thik di ya ge tu me di chungyo res.
When you have your airplane, you can come up and we'll test it to see if it survives.
Ta kiran zo namru swesa ina an di choda di dela pe ni chero chestra thargum do chone chedu do chedum do ta show res dinen.
Okay, let's do it.
Dit dinen me ge ores ge ina an thargyo res chone chedu ya.
To the side. You ready? Go test. Oh. Oh, we call that a winner. Oh. Yeah, I keep the best. It's good to
Chik in the tang do na.
Did this go? Okay, so we have a lot of baby planes that didn't make it, and some that were very fast and did make it.
Ta tanda ngazo namru mangbu shtang roas. Di nanglola ta mangche khajislana tanda di thake ora di ke thu masonsra. Khashe jigi che di thik di ge thu sons.
So all these planes survive to make baby planes.
Ta di changma thar res. Di ge en tanda guzar ma toy yo dinde jital ha di dinzo cha de res.
So we'll hand our winning plane, our surviving planes back out, and everyone copy one of the surviving planes and make a baby like this.
Ta di pugu yor lagora chune chitu di chune chitu chungyo res. Di gi pugu so di pugu gor ladu gala dinde ro yangyo dinde chikpa ji sogu res.
And we'll see if our babies do better than the previous generation.
Di ladu gala ta di rab thangbo di chagyo ras and rab niwa delta pugu di guzar di chadu gala di ni duru aina khandi yaga du ta hosta. Chune chitu du chitu du ta res niwa diang.
So we're going to, everybody study the one you were given, see if you can make a copy.
Ta thanda di thik di ge cha yu de chune chitu nge cha de ra di namdu den zo di chibo ji gyang su res sob ta rab ni ba di sawa sue da di thanda hang ma ju da chune chitu nge ju ra di chibo ji gyang su res.
Doesn't have to be exact, but look at your parent and try to make your plane kind of like it.
Ta thanda chune chitu nge namdu dis matam so inchi mi ji chikpa chikyang gu yu mares di da nyewe sta di ta u ju su gu res.
And this time, our planes have to be a little bit better. They got to be a little bit better at flying to survive. So only the ones that make it past here will survive. When you're ready, you can go up there and test your plane.
Ta thanda ju ro ni ba di rab ni di ta thanda dine tang do gala thik di ge gu res ta ya ga gu res ni ba di. On di.
Okay, one last flight.
Oh, ta thama inda sadi.
Okay, so look at all the planes that we got to go all the way down there. I think our planes improved in this generation. Do you agree?
Ta rab din le du gala nganzu gi namdu di yarge ro dos khan so muthu us. Nzu res adi thik di ya ge yo.
Do you think if I gave you these planes to have babies, we'd do even better?
Ta di namru din zo yang pugu ke wa ina swa and pugu din zo ni dile ya ga yore sam gu des. Yes.
We don't have time for it right now. But after class, you can make airplane babies.
Ta thanda tijo yo mars and zilra sa sa jal khana so di pugu disun na di res.
I'll leave the winners up here. So, that is similar to how evolution works.
Di thanda drodang chura di thanda nganzu gi phegyu drodang di rau cha de res thanda namru di peshan ten so.
But of course, one big difference is you all knew what needed to happen. You needed your plane to fly far.
Ine thanda di kharala na kebar chi yo res chimbu ji di kharala na thanda khiran ju chego chego gapsu ta ni di ge wo yor la ni ni ha go yor ras.
Hold on 1 minute. I'm going to get a movie for you all.
Long age ten is antis shuru nansa.
So this movie was a TV show done where they had a famous scientist show regular people how to do experiments.
Di la du thanda nyenti na la tuen shangi ta di longi di res di khari la na cheri pa gi da chidangi nga ju cheri ta che jora khande che gu me di tung gi res di nyenti di nam.
And in this experiment, it was about evolution. And they had 3 people for the experiment.
Ta thanda ta che jora di khari ko tho la re la na thanda nyenti na longi di na la phegyu da di ta che di cha de res and di na lo la misum te res.
They did not tell them the experiment was about evolution, though.
Ne di na lo ta thanda ta che di phegyu gi gang la res la la yo ma res.
So they had 2 people, and they put them in a room, and they gave them pieces of clay, and they told them to make 4 different shapes.
Ta minyin di khambal na sha res ra di la de khurani la khariter la dam te res and dam di kiran su ta 4 different shapes, right?
Yeah.
And yip thanda dam te sha ra di ani yip mindo shi su la ni khurani la res.
They had no idea why they were making these shapes, but they just made these shapes 4 each, and then gave these 8 shapes to another person.
Ta thanda mi chi khurani la kharishir la na dam di te ni yip mindo shi su la res di khari chini su gu me di che she ma res dam di yip mindo shi su chu bu la res ani minyin di dam di pheju chini ani yip mindo shi su ani khoran la rangja pha lo res.
The scientist told that person to take those 8 shapes up to the top of this tower.
Ani cheribadi konsul kharla la na tat da ip ge chasa di ge di thanda thoza rimbuji gang gang chel shalan la res.
At the top of the tower, he found a catapult. So he did the only thing he could think of to do, which was to catapult the shapes out.
Ta thanda thoze gala khila ra thoze gala khila du gala gang la khari yor la na shing den level do chi ma chala yu nge shta den ri yor res di la du gala ip khande chi shan ma yu gu yor ras tene.
Okay, so he's putting the shapes on the catapult, and you can see there's a target out on the ground.
Di la du thanda di shing yu nge shta di yu du gala ni yuksa khol li gor na wala sa gala sa yor res ip di.
So once he does all 8 shapes, he takes them and he brings the shapes. Oh, this is, I think, a little far. He'll bring the shape back to the 2 women. They don't know he was doing the catapult. And he asks them to copy the shapes that got closest to the target.
Di la du sala mal hung sa ra chala di lung sa jala ip khande yor tharang ja yang khini thanda nang khangba nang la minyi di la rangja ti res ip tharang su bu gre lan en khoni su gu res.
They have no idea why he picked, of all the shapes they made, why he picked those.
Da koran su ip mang bu ji su ra di ne ne dit khajin da me khonjo ha gu gu ma res.
So they just try to make copies as best they can, and then they're going to give them back to the man.
Di la du koran thanda mi di ip khande ji khile wa na di ani pe shu ni koran ni gi ip di su gu res.
They're talking about how they have no idea why they're making these shapes.
Da koran ni khari ke je shi gur la wa na di khajin su gur la jura ip di ke je shi de res di korla.
And he takes them back up to the catapult and throws them off the tower again.
Ya rangja koran gi thanda ip su sa jo di khini yan di thanda thoze tho di gan shani ma yu e di rangja chi gu res.
That looks like fun, doesn't it?
Keep the woman do sa ta di.
So again, he puts them all off the catapult and picks the 4 that get closest to the target.
Na koran gi ne di khari chawlan mau ta ge jo mau di nyedam la khari leo de ni ip di le ni khunil te ni din de su chu res.
And they copy again, and they do this 3 times.
Di su ne ani thengma sum su res din de.
And you can see that they're getting to be a little more like cannonballs with each generation.
Di la du rab ma do du gala khari da nyeru do la ni ip di thanda ri do ya polo nang shi cha du dwaste.
Even though the women making the shapes had absolutely no idea that he was catapulting them off this tower.
Ta thanda pomoni yora di nang lo la kurani ha gu yo mares ip su jo di gang ni ma yu gu yo di khuni la ha gu yo mares.
And this is much more similar to how evolution actually works.
Di anta khari do cha yo la na jo phelgyu do dang di do cha de res.
Evolution is not trying to make a faster cheetah. It's not because the cheetah wants to be faster. It's just copying the cheetahs.
Dila dugala pelgyur gita chita la di sigla di jokbu gugu yorelan dishi di gugu yomar dishi yomares evolution and pelgyur di kharcholna chita di sig di jor do di yores kuran.
So the cheetahs get faster because the faster ones survive, not because the cheetahs are trying to be faster or need to be faster. It's just those that are the ones that live.
Kainlana tanda pelgyur gi chita yoksho di de gugu yorelan dinde taju chisha gyo chag yomar tanda dinal khari shiur lawana yoksho di tsune chetu yores chide rignang.
And that's the process that we call natural selection, and that's how much of evolution occurs today.
Di la du pelgyur jodan tanda tharan res ani di rangjung demtu korchik shi yores.
So we finally got to the mechanism of how evolution actually happens. Does it make sense? Do you have questions?
Ta tanda pelgyur jodan rangjung demtu la di jodan de res inkira jo seo chasu yesa di gan and tiwa yos di gan.
Tanda di jerati go jerati gong budi bundu jini ni pura ba josu le yo la. Tanda matsu di subu no di jini jerati tene jo yo ma. Ati khori ga tenji di kalaji ti ram bundu jini yo ma. Khori ga tenji di kalaji.
So in this experiment, the man picks up the shape and then gives them to the girls, right? So in our natural environment, how do our genes change with the environment? So adaptation in terms of.
So the genes are not necessarily changing. It's just some are not being passed on to the next generation. So the ones that get passed on are the ones for a more cannonball shape or a faster cheetah.
Tanda rigze duo duaji shiyo mares rigze ma user la tongi jura di rigze dia ma duo lan shiyo res rigze la duo duo shiyo mares.
The man didn't pick the shape. The girls made shapes. He tested which one got closest to the target. He didn't pick, he just took the ones that got closest, took them back to the girls to make again.
Korangi damba doji chagiyo mares kaina na korangi tanda di saja di tanda taj gyan shada mauj digi nyesho la pomudi soy ibjura di nyesho la lit ma sagyo di damni in korangi leni ani pomudin zulti res korangi changma koran dobe gi dam dili chijo ma res dina.
We'll talk tomorrow about something called mutation, which is how DNA can change, but natural selection is really about just what survives to the next generation.
Ta tanda gyurdo yungu res DNA nala di in mutation la res di kor sangi sheyis ta ine ngaran tanda rangjung dem tu na khari shiyor launa rigze denzo phamani ma user la tongu yo shiyor res.
So every time he launched those shapes over a tower, he just picked the top couple, the top shapes, and brought them back to the girls to try to make again. That might not have been the shape the girl herself made first time. It might have been her partner, the other person's shape. It was just random.
Diladu dame di thagaran damgwe ibjura thagaran yo mares ta tanda yin ta gya yo di nyesho khari leo di nyeme roji cha do res khari ligo me ha go mares nyesho di damne ani korangi leni pomudil ti yo res.
So with our paper airplanes, right, we as a population got faster because we copied the fast planes, but we all still had the same paper, the same material that we started with.
Ta tanda ngajo namru gi chego ji chembas di nal ta yaksho di khandi me sone chinye di ngajo peshu ni ani tashu se ras diladu ani yaro to na si che ine thangbo gochuk de khar gochuk lana changma yuje chik cha de res shogo de peju chi res.
Mutation would be if like I gave you a piece of paper and then I added a paper clip that you could add to your plane to make it fly even more straight and fast.
Diladu gyurdo la di khandel la yor la na thanda shogo gi namru ji se ra diga la gyua khari ta la na thanda shogo jinche cha juya tinde gar ani namru di gyoro ta ya se na tinde rigla ni gyurdo la yor res.
이 문제가 실제라 실제로 토탈만이 운동 오라 되고 타마데가 안에 다치 제제 타마다 진짜 도도로 찍어서 차서 어때 따라서 아쉬운 대로 되어서 내가 어때 아쉬운 대로 나와요 그러면 내가 아쉬운 대로 나와서 건강 먹고 간다 아니 샤말레 몸부터 좀 다르잖아 몸이 더 그랬어 아니 시우도 사야를 말해 그 조지바에 혼이 들어라도 아쉬운 대로 배설더라 안다 도도 이 문제가 진짜 타마다
So we have seen in the video that the man picks up the shapes and ultimately we saw some shapes kind of round. So is it example of natural selection? We have example from peppered moth, right? The one who camouflages with the environment survives best. So this example, is it an example of natural selection? The one which you showed?
Yes, it is, because he catapulted the shapes off, and the best survived. So the best were selected for. And then when the women made copies of them, that was like the cell or the organism reproducing itself. And they became more ball-like because the women cannot make an exact copy of that clay shape. So small changes happen over time because you can't make a perfect exact copy. Just like our airplanes were not perfect copies of the parent plane.
Tanda di longi students adi rangjung dingru ki pesun chagi yores. Hines na tanda ib di ma yugu yoras. Ma yugu gala midigi ta kuranta gya yu di nyeshu di damgu yora. Di khari chungu yorla na tsune chetu gen denzo. Denzo chungu yores. Di le ani pomu denzo ma tigi yores ib di. Tanda ta ma gya yu nyeshu le yu denzo damgu yora kurang. Di le ni pomu denzo tigi yores. An pomu denzo ki tanda di ib korangi teo nangshi suyo la di suya tapshi chigi yores. Ine chikpa chikyan chagi yorola na chagi yomares. Di la di ngaranzo rangjung kham na drodang draw draw yores. Gyuzar pegi yore ine chikpa chikyan shu tugu yomares ra. Chikpa chikyan shungu yomares. Di drodang di chikpa draw yores tanda di nan.
Since the women didn't know they're trying to hit a target, when he brought back that shape, they didn't know what features of that shape were good for their survival or bad. Or they would have all started making spheres. They just tried to copy the shape, but the parts maybe that they looked over were the important parts for the success.
Dilo do Quran so ib di tiyora tedu gala ib khande jusena chune che ya re khande gugu yor la jora di pomuni del khegu di yo mares kodo yo mares di la do Quran so la kharite odi nangshi swedyan chi ani midil party yores.
And it was not the shape that evolved. I cannot evolve. It is the population that evolves over time. So our population of planes got faster. No one individual plane got faster.
Dila du thanda ib dila phelgyu dorela na shig mares ani thanda ib chikran jila phelgyu dorela di shig mares thanda di khari gang ke shola na chogdu chiga ji shig yores tangara jo pejun shawaina namru chikrang la thanda phelgyu churela di shig mares chogdu khoro shig yores nimdu keje shig gapsu phelgyu gang
ni duarte garena tanda chudi chada chuna ko mutute jinne to chwala karade kolani mare jinyu ro ka chudi kora
Gyo tredi.
Tera ne da hindi segire kare segire ko chudi chitinde chwala kare chudi ko na moti jima ne ro ga ro chikte doisi ina ko chudi hindi segire kare segire da ina ina ji ane kaji ji mare Ritipe no ji wa jinyu ro do as tera hindi kare segire res Chetan the painter sabe go on experience. Chetan the painter tanda yuki jinye dete tena jato mambo chicha isko jinela jinela no mambo chicha is. Chetan the painter sabe go on experience.
So we can see that many organisms have become extinct, and he would like to know what is the starting point of evolution, where you can say, okay, this is the point where evolution has started. So he wants to know that.
As soon as life began, evolution started.
The khani gochu rela jora pelgyur di cheso gochu one chine ani pelgyur gochu rela res.
As soon as they were competing for resources and not all the cells could survive, evolution was happening.
Dila du da thabung din jo Quran jo chune che du da de thapsi chigras chiloni lingruas ngobun di ani Quran jo kara tendur chini chune che tunge din jo thagi yores di ani ngonjo phegyu lagi yores Quran jo rig di ma pe rani phegyu di lagi yores.
So as soon as you have those 4 postulates of Darwin, right, you have variation. That variation is inherited. Not everybody survives, and the survival is not random. Evolution is going to happen.
Tangweni Darwin ge dosol shi di yos di kharlana chogdu na khari gogorlana minda gogor la jora na so badi chagi res anchik di ani second postulate is
It's inherited.
tanda tat di kenam jora di keda di ani ma guzar la ma tong yor la jora di shi res Ani somebody the third
They don't
one
all
is
survive.
okay. The changma chune chituru lana chituyo mares. And chune chinge sur law na di ngeme res lan di shiyu res. Di shiyo na pelgyur chungu res.
Tanda pendir sayapiji soka nisukje da senara nisukmo jepende loada kishego joas. Soka jenyo asora. Kino nere kashi animal jepende sona tela jende karis pendir karis geres.
Chogdu chig na ta na ri khashi phelgi dus khashi nyung ru dus ra.
Sondi shida sona ta soka jida sonara kimo bewada soka mo jichena lo geres.
Kare chogodi ngo khachi gure. Mangnyung chogodi chero du res.
sondi shida sona 나는 정같이 담바여이나 그뭐 대화되다 정같다 주중아야 칸 로고요. 단다는 소디시다서나 제대세야데 제대세야데 자나니 누나마도 소 맞와이나데 제문도 드니와라데가 베제시리가.
ngadi khare sunbe ngal hawaina.
누나마도 맞와이나 데 안에 멘테티 손이 빠져가 베제시리가.
Kare yodi. Ngal hayendu. Di lagi yor west lan ra. Tangbo go tu tu chu yo che nga ma shin ha yo ma res ra ani. So when we started the population, there were 10 in a population, say for example, and in the next generation we have only 5. Jelata rab niba delunga mash phalawara. So do we say there is evolution? So it seems like the number has reduced.
Evolution is the change in the gene frequency over time. So when we had our monks with shawls, and they started out equal shawl, no shawl, and in the next generation they were not equal shawl, no shawl, evolution had happened. So it's when the proportions change.
Tadila du figure like the Tananzo Pezu Shawana Saint Tumjo, the Matumjo Sheras, the Tuzu Mama Rodugala, the Nanglo with the Tanga Durgu Durwainas Ra, the any Manda Chai, the Dila, any figure like your rest, and the Tanda di Mangyung Keshi Dugala, Manzo Subunala Rigze Jura, Rigze Digana do rest.
So in Marge's example, where there was a plague that wiped out many people, and the survivors survived because they had a particular gene variety, we were evolving at that time, even though our population numbers were lowering.
Tatanda Tuzuchigla, Mimambu Shujita, Mewachayu Inastra, Di Nanglo, Kashe Sone Chitu Yores, Di Ladu, Di Tuzu de la Manzugita, Peju Duyo Ajishi Yores, Peju Duyo Res. Seo Chasses. Yes.
나 심할래라 심할 어때라고 pensana 아무 거랑 안에 나보라고 이미지 가만히 나보라고 이미지라 안에 거랑 보고 있다가 안에 리지다 오는 고역 빈적을 보고 다 보고 마음을 사네 안에 보고 마치 다 가도라고 돼 너무 자서 아니나 야 가도 너무 자서 아니나 되니 가만히 있는데 안에 리뷰라고 돼 자동생을 그래 하나 리뷰 빈적이.
So if there are two butterflies, both the parents both are black, and if there is an offspring many offsprings which has because of their environment there are blue offsprings. So can we say that the butterflies have evolved or ani chik dikhare rigze jo dor westman ra rigze jo dor yana pheju dor reslani. The chick the pheju dorel yana harlande. So can we say that it has evolved or the generation has become extinct, the black population?
Well, are the blue ones the babies of the black ones and they have the same DNA?
The ngombu jirolas di ani phama nakudi rang rewes ani korani gi DNA yor wes pugudila.
이 주간에 안에 포만이 좀 주바치
Pamani napu ruas lora. Yes, both are black butterflies. The offspring came from these two black butterflies.
So then how did they become blue? Did their DNA change between the parent and child, or is it just the environment made them blue?
The two in lasra. The ngombu chara. Pama da puguni para DNA la juadore yana koryu gikingi ngombu chares the two dinsa.
ane diba da rizide pamani ma tonjira ane korangi 조가라고 내 거의 빈지 지방에 물을 차서 이제 한국 차선 물을 넣었자 안에 파만이 나버라 그게 대원들 안에 파만이 이제 유스는 리지데 안에 변절로 야는 짜다듯이.
So the DNA is from the parents, and because of environment, because the butterfly has to adapt in that environment, it has changed into blue. So can we say that this generation has become extinct, the black generation has become extinct, or can we say that the population of butterfly has evolved?
Can the blue butterflies make black and blue butterflies, or only blue butterflies?
The blue ones?
Yeah.
That and the ngombuji yorela but the chimale ngombuji yores pugudi. Ani digi any gudon chidugala guzar di ngombu pugudi ngombu yore napu yorelas. Ngombure. Okay, it gives rise to blue offsprings.
Okay. So yes, if they can no longer make black butterflies, then then yes, we could say the black ones went extinct.
It's not that the black butterfly has produced a new species, but that trait for black color is gone from that particular population of butterflies. Yes, that black color is extinct in that population.
Oh, ta ngombu digi yang ngombu ranki gi urla ora jala. Ta ngombu ranki urla ra. And kela keran thio di tangsa di na di pugu digi di pugu yangyo chawa ina khale jiyo res lan guzar di ra. Ngombu reso iba. Ta dende imba ina ani kela ilen khar gesla na ta nakpu gi kheda di zamshara pe di la dugala hota di ani chadong dorelan lagyo res.
If there were two blue-eyed people and everyone else on the planet died except those two blue-eyed people, all their children would be blue-eyed.
Tatanda say kola zamni na cha shastra mi nira nil ha res thama kurani ga mi khado ta na ngobu ni res kurani la pu ke na pu mi ngobu church ki res.
So in that sense, black eyes are extinct from the population.
Dila du ta chogdu dig nang la an mi na pu yugen di chadong chirilan la yu res ngoi so chase
근데 걔네 그러더라 심한데 다 그만이 나빠이 봐도라 근데 그걸 누가 둘이 지와이한테 그래라 근데 지금 뭔가 참고 그랬어 처음에 때문에 대제변에 뭔가 제용이라 다시 많이 나빠인데 진짜 살겠어 그거로
di kedadi
아주 미데 아프리카네 다미오 아프리카네 시마레스 그거로
mi africa ni chores
아프리카 많이 받아 가지고 समाचार मेरी काबू लोचो देवरा तंगा सुजना अफ्रीका की नृत्य के लिए तीव्र युवा मानसी थी जिनसे सारे से मानसी सुजना भी युवा मानसी पड़ता
rigze laurada rigze di restaurant. So we say that humans, the first humans were Africans, so it came from Africa. So right now we can see diverse forms of we have white, black and all mixed, right? Brown also. So the first gene which was in the first humans, which was back in Africa, is it still there among whites and browns?
The gene for skin color?
The khado di pakbe khado di shiyo roasa. Pakbe khado di shiyo esa. Yes.
Yes, it's just changed. It mutated over time, and for people that lived in dark environments, they needed light skin to get nutrients from the sun. Is that, you put it better?
I think it's the dark skin is protective, so it stays in places, that gene does not change in places where humankind originated in Africa. So all around Africa, people are in general more dark skinned. Up north where you didn't need that protection, that gene was allowed to not be so strong or to drift or just to not necessarily be exactly the same, and there was no pressure from strong sunlight to keep the skin dark.
Then the Africa rocha shoina papa napu yoros muzo di ani khari kebenchi khari yorlona pakwa napudi khonjo nima chau shu res sajadi di ni sungyo ti res napudi ta dini ma mi di juta sa thosa ro droina thanda nima gi thanda ye jora di digas gi khoryu minda edu gala ani pakwa napudi bu me cha andi khali khali jo to yo di shi res.
You can see though as you age it's nice to be born with darker skin. White skin is very flimsy and gets ucky over when you get old because of sun damage. People with darker skin generally don't look like this when they get old.
Papa napu ine yaga res khailana di sungyo yaga lara nimani and this loyas yas le dugal digas tuashira du mares ta kau yemba ina nimagi dichi kwenche nugenchi ani tanda nyama theda di kange mangayo res.
But this disadvantage of white skin doesn't matter when I get to be 60 because I've already had my children. There's no bad thing that happens because of crummy skin before you get old. So it allows to become whiter and whiter because I've already reproduced my offspring.
Dilo di pagba di dis nyam duor lara ti nyame di ta lo thujus la chaw na kheba khe su mares ta ine khais na pugo ke din jo thuju sangma yes hares ke sares di ge ni thanda pagba di kaw yimba na ge digas kheba su yo mares.
If there was something bad about white skin that kept me from having children, then there wouldn't be so many white-skinned people around.
Dila du thanda papa kau yimba khe thanda kangi tigi yo ainas nyugyo yo ainas ani thanda miri kau rig di en kebel nyunga duras pu nyunga yungu ras di khe kangi tigi yo mares.
So next lifetime I want to come back a little darker skinned. I hope that happens.
Ta kyo chima jura ngara tis chamdo naga yona diksa res. Amaji la puji to pomoji gyo res ani korani changsa gana pinja ni di ha pu ku pa do ki dos la re ku pa ke je shema tu ni ku pa le yo lemba le nya lemba le yo. So if a mother has two children, so a boy and a girl, if they get married and have a child, so we have found that the child is kind of like in terms of intelligence, it's behind other children. So ani rigzegala kebar yorwes ra rigze nyamgu dos. So we can see that the gene has degraded.
Yes, so the problem when you get siblings having babies, so we each have 2 copies of every gene, one from our mom and one from our dad. So generally, even if one of those copies is not so good, we still have 1 good copy, so we're okay.
Dila duta nganzo mi khande ji man nganzo chobung keshi dugala dashu phani chik mani chik li yoras dila dugal phada mani chik chile du di dashu di shira yabu me oinai dashu chik thandu yoras di yabu ina ni kheba shira sugu mares.
But when you have siblings, they might both get that bad copy from their parent. So good gene, bad gene. Good gene, bad gene of brother and sister.
Tadi rigze yaga da dugala ni shagi insra. Nakudi yaga che maudi duga che ani di pudi chungda nakudi yaga che maudi duga. Kurani pinja puda pumuni pinja resra.
So if that brother and sister have a baby now, that baby might get 2, this one and this one. Because they're both carrying the same bad gene. So the chance of that baby getting 2 copies of a bad gene is much, much higher than when strangers marry.
Di kita thanda di Kurani pinjara di indugala rigze duga ni di kesi nyam do thewa nasra an pugu dil rigze duga ni di ligi res di thanda duga ni di le thanda pinja imba ina ani di khogab di manga chayu res di ke di manga thiyu res.
Some of the problems we see when people have manipulated their cattle or their goats or their wheat, they can uncover some traits that are very harmful when certain things are stressed.
The kenam thanda taya yora di ani ngara zo shimba do cha shawana ta simji ina re ani chising ba ina re dinal mangbuchi shimba din zo gi so res din re tamedi.
last question.
And chua thama inda se. Pugu imba ina. So in males we see beards and mustache, and in females there are not. So is it because of the environment or is it because of the genes that there are differences?
It's because of the genes that we get mustaches.
Tatanda rigze yura, rigze ki kengi kapuda gya jura di res, rigze la rali res. Rigze di luwainas. Ta luwainas ra. Ta lu ni rada. Ale ta namgyu ta tangyo di lewa ta te di ale le ho. So he's saying that he has seen a monk who was given a blood transfusion from an Indian. Blood from Indian. So Indians have mustache and beard more than Tibetans. So later on, after blood transfusion, the monks have started growing more mustache and beard. So if the same blood was transfused to a woman, will she get the same effect like beard and mustache?
So facial hair, it's generally, we see differences not because of differences in the genes. We all generally have those genes. They're just turned on more in some people. So it can be turned on by testosterone or off by estrogen. So sometimes when a woman is no longer able to have babies and she doesn't have as much estrogen in her body, you might see some facial hair start to grow a little bit because she's not turning off those genes anymore.
And what about the blood transfusion?
Well, hormones could treat if it was, but not the chemical that expresses that is not in the blood. It's not in the.
That probably just like bothered their body, and their body's response was to adjust hormone levels. So it's probably because of the chemicals in their body changing genes being on or off.
Tatanda donga la puch ke yora khabuda densuri anjo mi changma phuda phoma khawai na phoma changma lo yores ta di kharil ra le la na rigje gyola na ta rigje di se long la jo dila on off che jora dil la yores an thanda di cha sho na tha pa jora di ani subu gi yalin te jora di ani thanda subu na la pho imba na testosterone di mangal lu yores che di lu du gala ni pudin jo manga ke che ani estrogen mangal lu yo aina thanda je di indu gala ni ma se jora di yalinte ani khabu nyunga dinde yores.
Blood is different. The cells in your blood that are red have no DNA at all. They're just, we'll talk about that sometime else.
Ta yoros na razu ta nang lola DNA yo mares di kor jala shigis.
Okay, thank you, and we'll see you tomorrow.
Ani sangi jeyons tushena.